The plain of the Jordan lay like a found treasure, green in the season of its blessing, full of springing water and pastures that fed many flocks. Yet beneath that outward beauty there moved a sickness. The laughter of the market, the songs at dusk, the loosened laws of hospitality that had become license. Between hill and plain, two lives had chosen different ground. One man remained in the shelter of his tent, faithful to the covenant promise. The other had pitched his tent nearer the good fields and the soft comforts of the plain. That choice, simple as a morning step, would weigh like iron upon a family and a nation. If you will stay with this telling until the end, you will find not only the shock of ruin, but also the mercy that tarries and the summons to choose rightly. If you find these words helpful, stay with them, subscribe to receive more reflections like this, give a sign that you were here by liking, and turn on notifications so the next call of Scripture will find you ready. And it came to pass in those days that Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent in Hebron, watching the light move across the hills. His tent poles were set, his flocks grazed within sight. He had grown in years and in the knowledge of the Lord. His heart bore the steady rhythm of one who has learned to wait on the promise. It was beneath the great oaks of Mamre that the three men came, moving along the way as travelers, yet carrying a presence not like ordinary guests. Abraham saw them from where he sat, and rising quickly from his place, he ran to meet them, bowing to the dust of the road. "My Lord," he said, "if I have found favor in your sight, turn not away from your servant. Let a little water be brought, that you may wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. I will fetch a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. Afterward you may pass on from your servant, if so be you will do me this kindness." Sarah, within the tent, had been kneading dough. When she heard Abraham's voice in eager welcome, she moved with the quiet economy of a housekeeper. Bread from flour, a calf from the herd, curds and milk laid upon a platter. Abraham stood over the guests and waited, serving with hands that had learned hospitality as a sacrament. The men, one of them the Lord in the form known to the patriarch, accepted the fare. As they sat to eat, one of them spoke, and the words were like a bell struck at dawn. "About this time next year I will return to you, and Sarah your wife shall have a son." Sarah, in the tent, heard and laughed within herself. So great were the years between hope and visible proof. The Lord, who had knowledge of that inward smile, asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I indeed bear a child, now that I am old? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord?" Sarah denied, and the Lord answered her with a word that made reverent the small corners of the heart. "Surely you shall."
Those who came then rose and set their faces towards Sodom, for the Lord had appointed a different journey. Two of the three passed on toward the plain, while the other remained to speak with Abraham of things that lay deep in the counsel of God. Abraham, who had seen the glory of the Lord and had received a pledge of laughter, turned to life, lingered in the presence of this one who walks with the faithful. In the shade by his tent he stood and entreated the Lord concerning the righteous who might yet be found in the cities of the plain. The word came plainly. The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah was great, and their sin very grievous. The Lord told him of a purpose to bring a swift and consuming judgment upon that place of iniquity. Abraham's heart was moved, partly by love for his kinsman Lot, who dwelt in the plain, and partly by a love for justice itself, that the innocent should not perish with the guilty. He drew near and began to plead. "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" he asked. He appealed to the Lord's justice with bold reverence. "Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you destroy the place and not spare it for the 50's sake?" The Lord answered that if 50 were found, he would spare the city for their sakes. Abraham's pleading did not end in one breath. The interchange that followed is the model of a soul who dares to speak into divine deliberation, not to control God's holiness, but to seek the compassion that binds God to his covenant. He came down by slow degrees, 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10, each number a step of faith and care. The Lord, who delights in mercy, acceded to the boldness of the patriarch. If 10 righteous could be found, the place would be spared. Yet the account closes with a sober truth. Not even 10 were found. So the visitors went their way toward Sodom. The sun had slipped toward the western hills when Lot sat at the gate of Sodom, and Lot saw them and rose to meet them, for he had learned hospitality as one might learn a debt to repay. He had come to dwell in the city and to find his house among its courts. He was known there, and his greeting was one of urgent welcome. "Come in, I pray you, into your servant's house," he said, "and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways." His house may have been small in the scale of the city's buildings, but the offering of a roof and bread in that land is a solemn thing. To receive a stranger is to honor the sacred law of wayfaring. They consented to abide at his house, yet before night fell, there formed around the threshold a darkness of another kind. Men of the city, hardened and violent in their lust, who came like a crowd gathering for sport, and then assumed the face of law. They compassed the house from the street, and struck at the gate with voices that rose in demand. "Bring forth the men that are come to thy house," they shouted, "that we may know them."
Lot's wife drew near to the way, her face turned by habit toward the house where her life had stood. Whether by weakness or by longing, she looked back upon the city that had formed her days. In that brief turning, her fate was sealed. She became a pillar of salt, a silent monument of a heart that could not sever itself from what God had judged. The dawn found a sky untroubled for a moment, and then the heavens opened their testimony. The Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Most High. There was a consuming flame that melted the city's beauty into smoke, and the plain was filled with a cloud rising like a column of vindication. The sound of that calamity was not like the cry of battle, so much as the closing of a great book, an end that bore the weight of holiness. Where men had made mockery of law and compassion, there fell a justice that cannot be turned aside. Lot fled to Zoar and took refuge there as he had entreated. The little town became a shelter for the moment. Abraham, watching from the hill in Hebron, saw in the distance a smoke that rose as the smoke of a furnace. He rose up early and went toward the place where he had stood before the Lord. His heart bore the mixed sorrow and solemn peace of one who had known God's purpose and had also called upon his mercy. The narrative notes with sober tenderness that the Lord remembered Abraham, remembered the righteous heart that sought compassion, and so he spared Lot in the hour of judgment. Mercy and justice had met in that day. The covenantal love of God had shown itself in a rescue made possible by the entreaty of the faithful. In the coming days, Lot moved from Zoar to dwell in a cave upon the mountain, a humble and austere shelter that belied the softness he had sought in the plain. There, in the night's long labor of sorrow, his daughters feared the end of their father's house and the cessation of their line.
In despair and distorted reasoning, they made for themselves a means to preserve name and kin. What followed was an act born of desperation, a tragic choice that brought forth the nations of Moab and Ammon. The tale closes in this sorrowful note, so that even the rescued might be seen with the complex consequences of human frailty. Deliverance does not remove pain. Mercy does not erase folly. These events stand, then, as a mirror for the soul. The Lord's holiness is seen in the flames. His justice is unerring. Yet His mercy moves when the faithful intercede, when one heart stands in the breach and cries for grace. Abraham's boldness in the presence of God is not a model of arrogance, but of covenantal intimacy. He trusted the Lord enough to ask for the lives of others. Lot's life is a warning. To dwell where the world's good seems to prosper is to risk slow assimilation until the line between the pilgrim and the citizen blurs.
Guia de estilo e instruções para a síntese de fala. Você é um narrador palestrante com voz potente, forte e autoritária. O tom deve ser firme e inabalável. Contexto de continuidade. A frase anterior era: The line between the pilgrim and the citizen blurs. Você está no meio de uma frase, pensamento. Mantenha o ritmo e a força vocal sem quebrar a conexão. Haja como se estivesse transmitindo uma verdade fundamental. Hear this pastoral summons. If you have been tempted to linger where compromise is comfortable, turn away now. If you have grown fond of a city's ease and have traded the ways of the tent for the false comforts of the plain, remember Lot's wife and the weight of a backward look. Yet take heart, for the God who judges is also the God who remembers the covenant, and mercy can be found when someone takes up the work of intercession. Be as Abraham in humility and courage. Plead for the lost, stand for righteousness, and yet trust wholly in the Lord's righteous mercy. Listen for the echo of these ancient events in your own life. The cities of the plain are not only places on a map. They are patterns of living that arise when the appetite for immediate gain overcomes fidelity. The pillars of salt are not merely monuments of a single woman's glance. They are the lasting testimony to every soul that clings to ruin instead of running to God. Do not love the world that passes away. Run to the refuge that the Lord provides. The one who visited Abraham and spake of a son is the same who opens a way of salvation to those who will accept it. Now go back with me into that night at Lot's house for a moment. Listen to the cracked voices at the gate. Feel the sudden band of cold that is the grip of fear. See the stranger's face lit by lampfire as the angels move to blind the men. The rescue is swift and fierce. It leaves behind questions that will not be answered in comfort. In the hush after the flight, the plain smelled of smoke and ash. A shepherd led his flock away. A son-in-law mocked the warning and remained. Many small lives were swallowed by a judgment that fell like a seal. When the Lord's hand moved in that day, it declared that there is a boundary no soul may cross and remain. So stand now and consider your own boundary. Are you choosing the tent with its steady tether to the Lord? Or are you inching towards the plain, where prosperity softens resolve? Will you be one who pleads for the city's salvation, or one who laughs at the notion of repentance? The summons is urgent, because the end is certain. Choose life now. The road ahead of Lot and his family lay like a thin cord over a great ravine.
The angels had drawn them out, but the final breath of the narrative, the raining of fire, the pillar of salt, the caves and the painful births of nations, demanded reflection that could not be rushed. The plain, once beautiful, sent up a column of smoke that no eye could mistake. Abraham stood and watched. His heart had been given a glimpse of both divine wrath and divine mercy. He returned to his tent, the sound of his flocks about him, carrying within the knowledge that God's justice is real, and that yet God's covenantal love is steadfast. The nights still smelled of ash.
Travelers who passed by would speak in low tones of what had been done in the plain. Parents would tell their children of the danger of the city's easy ways. The memory of Lot's wife became a sobering lesson, not to be used as a token of scorn, but as a sober reminder that the heart's attachments can become the instrument of ruin. And Abraham, he continued to live the life of one who had received a promise, whose laughter had been turned to song, whose intercession had moved the judgment of heaven toward mercy. The tale has yet more to say. It calls the hearer to action and to pray like Abraham, to flee like Lot, to refuse the backward glance that hardens into ruin. The plain was beautiful and deceptive. So can be any place where the eye is set more on comfort than covenant. Keep your tent pitched toward the Lord, and let your feet be ready to run when the summons comes. And it came to pass, when the days of mourning and bewilderment had worn upon Lot and upon his daughters, that they went up into the mountain and dwelt in a cave. Neither man was with them to wife them. The land was full of ruin, and their hearts were heavy with fear and with the remembering of the city that was consumed. And the elder said unto the younger, It is meet that we make our father drink wine, and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. For there is no man in the plain to come unto us, and we shall be cut off from the earth. So they wrought their counsel one with another, and in the night they made their father drink wine. And the elder went in and lay with her father. And he knew not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. The elder bare a son, and called his name Moab. The younger also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ami. These are the fathers of the Moabites and of the children of Ammon unto this day. And the tale of their birth was a continual remembrance in the annals of the peoples, that from the ruin of the plain there sprang nations that would stand apart and oft contend with the seed of Abraham. The memory of that night was not told without sorrow. Mothers would speak of the daughters of Lot with a low voice, and travelers who passed by would turn aside their faces when the name of the plain was spoken. Yet even in that sorrow there was a lesson written plain. Exile and desperation may press men and women into paths that bear bitter fruit, and every nation hath its root in the choices of those who lived before it. Meanwhile Abraham abode by the oaks of Mamre, and his tent was set toward Hebron. He kept the way of the Lord, and his faith waited upon the promise that had been spoken. The years came upon Sarah as upon a ripe field, and her days were fulfilled as the Lord had said. But until the appointed time she had borne no child, and oft she lifted up her voice in longing. And the Lord remembered Sarah as he had remembered his covenant with Abraham. In the appointed season Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son.
Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, which Sarah bare him, Isaac. Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, and all that hear will laugh with me. For she had been barren, and had received laughter instead of sorrow. Her mouth was filled with song. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And the household rejoiced greatly, for the promise that had been spoken in vision and in covenant was made flesh in a child. Neighbors and those within his tent came and rejoiced with them. Sarah kept her countenance even amid the marvel, and Abraham's heart was full of thanksgiving to the Lord who heareth the cry of his servant. Yet with the joy there came the weight of remembrance. The days of weariness and of watchfulness returned to Abraham's house, for the world he lived in was not wholly given to the ways of the covenant. Ishmael, the son of Hagar the Egyptian, grew up in the household, and the laughter of one child was sometimes shadowed by the presence of another. Gentle whispers passed at the weaning of Isaac. Old fears and old promises found themselves knit together in new patterns that would demand counsel and trust. So Abraham rose up early in the morning to seek the Lord, and he entreated him for wisdom concerning his house and concerning his seed. The Lord spake unto Abraham, and said, In all that Sarah hath borne, and in all that is to come, my covenant standeth sure. Be not turned aside by the counsel of men, but keep thy heart in the trust of my word. For out of thy seed shall nations arise, and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Abraham bowed himself upon the earth, and his countenance was as one who had seen the hand of God both in judgment and in mercy. He remembered the smoke that rose from the plain, and he remembered the angels that came at night. He also remembered the promise that had been given at the beginning, when God called him from his country and said, I will make of thee a great nation. And now, when the time had come, the promise bore fruit as a tree in season. Thus the years about Abraham began to take on a new sound, the cry of a child, the laughter of Sarah, the lowing of his flocks, and yet the far-off echo of nations and of judgment. Men who dwelt in the region would tell the tale of the patriarch whose tents were pitched under the oaks, of the one who pleaded for a city and yet was taught the measure of divine justice. Some who heard were turned to awe, others hardened. But Abraham kept his tent fast to the Lord, and his feet were ready to run if called. In the shadow of the promise, the households of the plain and of the tent took their bearings anew. Where one life had been swallowed by ruin, another life now began with a cry. Where a backward look had become a pillar, a forward gaze was being restored.
Years multiplied, and Isaac knew the ways of his father's house. He walked in the fields where the flocks were driven, and learned to call the men that fed the sheep. Sarah's countenance kept its light, yet a shadow of watchfulness lay upon the patriarch's brow. For God had set a great thing before him, which required obedience beyond reckoning. After these things the Lord did prove Abraham. He called unto him, and said, Abraham. And he answered, Here am I. And the Lord said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Then Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. He said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder, and worship, and come again to you. Then Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand, and the knife, and they went both of them together. Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham answered and said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And when they came to the place which God had showed him, Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Then Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I, my son. And the angel said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Abraham lifted up his eyes, and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. The angel of the Lord called unto Abraham the 2nd time out of heaven, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. There Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose up, and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. The trial had passed like a furnace of testing, and left a faith purified and resolute. Men who dwelt near beheld the patriarch's steadiness, and spoke among themselves of the fear of the Lord that was upon him. Yet only those who walked with him saw the inward bending of his heart and the simple trust with which he offered what was dearest. Time went on, and the years laid their hand upon Abraham as on an aged oak. He maintained his tents near the oaks of Mamre, and the oaks stood as witnesses to the covenant and to the trials that had been passed beneath their shade. The flocks increased, and the herds multiplied. Sons and daughters of his servants were born, and the voices of many within his household made a kind of chorus about the tent doors. But the days of man are numbered, and Sarah's life came to its full measure. She died in Kirjatharba, and Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. He arose from before his dead, and communed with the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight.
And the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my lord, thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. Abraham bowed himself before the people of the land, and he entreated them for a piece of ground to possess for a burying place. He weighed and laid silver in the sight of them, 400 shekels of silver, current with the merchants. And Ephron the son of Zohar of the sons of Heth heard him. And Ephron answered Abraham in the audience of the sons of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of his city, saying unto Abraham, The field of Ephron, which is in Machpelah, which is before Mamre, the field and the cave that is therein, and all the trees that are in the field, I give thee the price of it. Bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land. Thus Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and he weighed to Ephron the silver which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current with the merchant. So Ephron's field in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, was made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. The morning passed into a settled hush, and Abraham rose up from beside his dead and comforted himself with the memory of God's promise. He lived many more years, and saw the children of his children.
His days forward as the days of the years, and before his death he called his son Isaac, and spoke unto him, and charged him concerning the way of the house, and the choosing of a wife from among their own. So Abraham sought a wife for Isaac from among his kindred, as God had commanded, and he entrusted the charge to his faithful steward, whom he sent to his own country and to his kindred. Thus the covenant moved forward in its appointed course, by counsel and by trust, and the line of blessing was preserved as the Lord had ordained. And the oak of Mamre, which had seen the laughter of Sarah and the wrestling of Abraham's faith, remained, and the tents was struck and set again as life required. The generations came and went beneath the open sky. Some learned to cleave to the Lord, others wandered in their own devices. But the record of those who trusted was kept in the memory of the people, and the promise given unto the patriarchs spread, slow as a river and sure as the morning. Yet the tale of Abraham was not closed, for the Lord had more to perform by him and by his seed. And the eyes of those who listened were turned unto the hills and to the ways of the faithful, that they might learn to number their days, and give ear to the voice that calleth men from their comfort into the path of obedience. And Abraham called his chief servant, the elder of his house, who ruled over all that he had, and charged him in the sight of his servants, saying, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and swear unto me by the Lord, the God of heaven and God of earth, that thou wilt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but thou shalt go unto my country and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son Isaac. The servant bowed himself before his master, and would have bound himself by an oath. Yet Abraham made him swear, and he took the oath. Then he set before him camels and goods for the journey, and raiment for a stranger, and he put into his hands all the charge and the counsel which had been upon his heart. He blessed the man, and sent him away with prayer upon his lips, and with the name of the Lord upon his journey. So the servant went forth, and when the camels were laden, and the company that went with him were about to depart, he lifted up his voice and said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw. And let it come to pass that the young woman to whom I shall say, Let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink. And she shall say, Drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac. And thereby shall I know that thou hast showed kindness unto my master.
E guia de estilo e instruções para síntese de fala. Você é um narrador, palestrante, com voz potente, forte e autoritária. O tom deve ser firme e inabalável. Contexto de continuidade. A frase anterior era Wilt thou hast shewed kindness unto my master? Você está no meio de uma frase, pensamento. Mantenha o ritmo e a força vocal sem quebrar a conexão. Haja como se estivesse transmitindo uma verdade fundamental. It came to pass when he had said, O Lord, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Rebekah came forth with her pitcher upon her shoulder. And she went down unto the well, and drew water. The servant hastened and met her, and said, I pray thee, give me a little water of thy pitcher. She said, Drink, my lord, and she let down her pitcher upon her hand, and gave him drink. When she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also, until they have enough to drink. So she emptied her pitcher into the trough, and ran again unto the well to draw for the camels. Thus did she for all his camels. The servant stood amazed, and he worshipped the Lord, blessing him who had led his steps. Then he brought forth jewels of gold, and bracelets for her hands, and a nose ring of gold, and he besought her, saying, Whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee, is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge? She answered, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. There was room in her father's house, and her brother Laban came out unto the man at the well. The servant bowed himself to the earth before the people of the place, and told them all that his master had commanded him. He declared the oath he had taken, and how the Lord had prospered his way. He set forth the tokens given to Rebekah, and the sign which the Lord had made plain. Laban and Bethuel heard, and their hearts were moved. They weighed the word of the man, and the providence of God, and they rejoiced that a kinsman had been found. Laban spake unto Rebekah, saying, Wilt thou go with this man? And Rebekah made answer, and said, I will go. Her willingness was plain. She girded herself with a shawl of modesty, and with her household's blessings she arose. Her kin laid forth raiment and sustenance, with camels laden with precious things. And they sent her away with the man that had come from Abraham. They blessed her and said, May the Lord make thy way prosper, and may thou be the mother of thousands and 10,000s of the seed of Abraham. The journey was long, and the camels paced the highways by day, and under the stars by night. The servant spake oft unto God in the domestic silence of the way, recounting the mercy that had followed him from the well until now. And Rebekah kept her place, sober of manner, with eyes that looked often toward the western lands, where the tents of Abraham might be seen. She travailed not in the journey, through weariness of spirit, but bore herself as one who knew the bidding of God upon her life.
When they were come to the land of Canaan, into the field where Isaac walked to meditate at eventide, behold, Isaac came from the way of the field, and his face was lifted up as he looked, for the evening shadows were gathering, and his heart was heavy with the memory of his mother.
He saw the camels approaching, and Rebekah saw him from afar. The servant told all that he had done, and he set forth the jewels and raiment which he had given her. He spake of divine guidance, of prayer answered at the well, and of the kindness of men unto his mission. Isaac went to meet Rebekah, and his countenance was changed when he saw her. She came into his tent, and he took her, and she became his wife, and she loved him. Thus was Isaac comforted after his mother's death, and the promise was upheld in the joining of the seed. The tents at Mamre were filled with a new tenderness, and Abraham beheld the covenant's shadow stretching onward through his son and his son's wife. After this, Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, Jokshan, Madon, Midian, Ishbak, and Shuah. He gave gifts unto these sons, and sent them away from Isaac to the east country, to make them their inheritance. In his old age, Abraham hearkened to the voice of rest and of the years, and his days were fulfilled. He fell asleep in a good old age, an aged man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah before Mamre. There they laid his fathers with their sons, and the earth closed over the one who had walked by a promise. The oaks of Mamre stood as they had stood, keeping the memory of laughter and of lament, and the tents were struck and set again as the life of the household required. The name of Abraham was told in the encampments and in the cities. The record of him who trusted in the Lord continued among the people. So the days of Abraham were ended, and the covenant remained. His house was multiplied, his seed was planted in its place, and the heritage of the promise passed into the keeping of Isaac and Rebekah. Men who had watched the patriarch's way and had marked his obedience spoke one to another of the fear of the Lord that had been upon him. Yet the inward dealings between the Lord and Abraham were known to few, and the secret mercies given unto him were the ground of the hope that endured. Thus the line ran on, slow and sure, and though the tents of the fathers moved, and the oaks dropped their leaf season by season, the promise tarried not, but came forward according to the Lord's time. The name Abraham was called father of many nations, and the memory of his faith was set like a watch upon the hills, that the children who followed might learn to number their days and keep their footsteps in the path of obedience and trust. And Isaac dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings, and the years rolled on.